In Star Wars, there is a mysterious energy field known as the Force. But what is the Force? Is it a fictional concept, or is it actually based in reality? According to Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together. Yoda says, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter." Darth Vader says, "Don't underestimate the Force." And Ahsoka Tano says, "In my experience, when you think you understand the Force, you realize just how little you know." Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Stefan, and today we're going to talk about the Force, but we are going to talk about the non-fictional Force, the Force that exists on Earth that has a bunch of known biologic interactions going all the way from water to DNA to cells, proteins, up to our brain, heart, and nervous system and consciousness. And this is known as the Schumann resonances. These are Earth's natural resonant energy fields, and we are going to go from the basics all the way to the advanced in this video. So if you have never heard of the Schumann resonances, then this is an excellent video to watch because you're going to get brought way up to speed. And if you are already aware of the Schumann resonances, then you're going to want to watch this video all the way to the end because we are going to go into some stuff that I have not yet covered on my channel about the Schumann resonances. So this will take you to a new level of understanding. But again, as Ahsoka Tano says, when you think you understand the Force, you realize just how little you know. With that stated, in a little bit of humility, let's start to understand the Schumann resonances, these natural electromagnetic energy fields that exist on the Earth and even out into space. So this right here is a Schumann resonances spectrogram. This is one way of looking at the Schumann resonances and interpreting those electromagnetic energy fields. Before that, let's roll back to when they were first theorized. They were first theorized in the early 1950s, and then they were actually observed in the late 1950s, early 60s. These are electromagnetic waves at very, very, very low frequencies. They're in the ELF band, so extremely low frequencies, and this means they have frequencies that cycle just 7.8 times a second for mode 1 on average, or 14 hertz, so 14 times a second for mode 2. This is the second harmonic of the Schumann resonances. And as an electromagnetic wave, these are photons of light. So luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. This is very true because we produce Schumann resonances with our brain. We produce Schumann resonances throughout our entire body. And these photons of light, though they have huge wavelengths, the foundational Schumann resonance wavelength being equal to the circumference of the Earth at 40,000 kilometers, we naturally produce these and utilize them. They're everywhere in our environment. They penetrate us. They are within us. They're created by all living things. So we have Schumann resonances in the lithosphere. You can measure them in the Earth's crust, and they show up as clear, distinct peaks. You can measure them in the atmosphere, like we see here with this spectrogram as collected by the Space Observing System out of Tomsk, Russia. And then you can also measure them out into space in the radiation belts, for example, even in the ionosphere, and we will go into all those dynamics plus the known biology. So let's start with the spectrogram. This is the most recent data from the past few days, though you may be watching this in the future. I have a general power legend there that I made. So this blue is low power, so there's less energy. And then you have green here. This is about normal power levels. This is about the normal amount of energy. And then white is high, so it goes green to orange to yellow to white, and that is the highest power. So that means that there's more photonic energy at this frequency and at this time, because this right here, this spectrogram that we're looking at is a measure of frequency, so from 0 to 40 hertz, and then across time. So this is 0-100 hours local time in Tomsk, Russia, and then it goes through the full 24 hours of the day. So there are diurnal rhythms. These are daily 24-hour rhythms that we see in the Schumann resonances. You can see them here. Here is the, in general, the daylight hours Tomsk, Russia is pretty far north, and we're getting close to the solstice. So you can see that they increase in energy, going from more blue to green during the daylight hours, and then they decrease here at night, though sometimes we see these like pulses of energy across the ELF spectrum, the extremely low frequency spectrum, during times that you might not expect. And then you see the next day, sun rises overhead. We get an excitation of the Schumann resonances across 7.8 hertz, that foundational mode, 14 hertz mode 2, 20 hertz mode 3, 25 hertz mode 4. You can see mode 5 there at 33 hertz or so, very faint. It shows up a little better right there. And then again, we get our nighttime window. So these change depending on the season. They change depending on your location around the world. They change depending on whether there is local thunderstorm activity or whether there's a space weather event, like let's say a solar flare that induces geomagnetic volatility, a geomagnetic storm. These connect to the Earth's temperature. They are one of these energy fields that connect geophysics to biophysics, and they really are like this central link to everything. It's really quite fascinating how well connected the Schumann resonances are, and that's just because they are the natural resonant frequencies of the Earth. And we're going to be talking about resonance a lot in this video. We'll be talking about ion cyclotron resonance and how the Schumann resonances interacts with ions both outside the planet and then also in our bodies. And so this is all fundamentally at its core based on resonance. And Nikola Tesla was quoted as saying, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And that is very, very true. So these Schumann resonances vary across time and space, but because they have such broad wavelengths, that foundational mode at 40,000 kilometers, they have a global characteristic too. So you can measure them anywhere on the planet, and though they will differ depending on your observation location, there will be pretty broad similarities between all the different data for any particular moment in time. So we have our data here. I'm going to go back to this. I first want to kind of explain more by looking at this Earth that I made here. This is an Earth cutaway. So you can imagine this is the Earth sliced right in half, cross section. We have our inner core there, as you can see off to the left, and then our outer core. And you'll see all these looped arrows. Those are all indicating conduction and electrical currents in the Earth's surface and then beyond in other layers. So there's, for example, mantle convection. So this is the physical transport of mantle material, this very viscous but still liquid on geologic timescales. Those have a convective cycle, but there's also extremely powerful electric currents that travel through the outer core that help and are what generate and sustain Earth's magnetic field. Here are the field lines there. You see them going out and then coming in. And then these electric currents also exist in the mantle, and they are, as you increase the depth, the electrical conductivity of Earth increases. And then we also have electric currents in the lithosphere. And again, once you go past like further down with depth, they get stronger, especially when you pass the N and P junction at about 35 kilometers, because you go from, PN junction, you go from P-type semiconductor geologic materials to N-type. And N-type have abundant free electrons, but P-type don't. So now the reason I'm showing you this is because Schumann resonances are measured in the crust. So here they're depicted by these red lines there, and we have our oceans and our biosphere. Here, just a thin little layer. This is not to scale, just showing you this. But here are our Schumann resonances. Just a very easy visualization. You can see how big this wavelength is. It only does one pulse across the entire globe. It's actually kind of hard to visualize, but you can see here the wavelength is at the crest and then it's at a trough there. So, but this isn't exactly to scale. Keep that in mind. Here's another Schumann resonance, maybe a higher mode there. with a shorter wavelength, higher frequency, pulsing more often. But you can measure the Schumann resonances radiating out of the crust. You can measure them in the atmosphere, and then you can also measure them in the ionosphere, where there are very strong electrical currents. And then you can even measure these Schumann resonances, and they have with satellites, out beyond the ionosphere into space, like in the radiation belt. So the Schumann resonances are observable in the lithosphere, ocean, biosphere, atmosphere, ionosphere, and in space. The ocean, you may not think that they would do well there. The ocean is very conductive, but that was one way the Navy wanted to communicate with submarines without the submarines having the surface, was using Schumann resonances, using extremely low frequency electromagnetic waves, just like a normal radio transmitter, but at extremely low frequencies. You would just need a huge antenna to do it, but then that signal would be able to get picked up, 100, 200 feet down, so the submarine could maintain depth. And they do have these ELF receivers and transmitters for military purposes. So they are used for a variety of things. They're, of course, natural energy fields, but these extremely low frequency energy fields have multiple applications for humans, not just in terms of our biology, but through technology that we have. So they radiate out of the crust. You can actually see that profile here. This is a profile of electromagnetic activity for the lithosphere as measured in decibels. And you can see clear spikes at the Schumann frequency. So here's mode 1 at 7.8, mode 2 at 14, mode 3 at 20, and then going down the line to 25, 33, and 39 hertz. This is from some data collected in the 70s. Our equipment is much more advanced now, so we could get an even more precise measurement of these Schumann resonances if we so wished. And they propagate up out of the crust. They also propagate nicely in the atmosphere, because the crust and the lithosphere, or the crust, lithosphere, and the ionosphere, which starts about 50 kilometers up, going all the way to 1,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, that forms a waveguide. So electromagnetic radiation is able to kind of bounce and get trapped in between these two layers. The way they propagate radio waves is they shoot some radio waves and they'll bounce off the ionosphere, and you can pick them up over here. So the Schumann resonances do the same thing, but because they have these wavelengths, our natural harmonics with the Earth's wavelength, the Earth's circumference, then they are able to propagate globally. Now, Schumann resonances are also created by things like thunderstorms, lightning strikes, release a surge of electromagnetic energy, and this radiates out across a whole bunch of different frequencies, going all the way from 0 up into the gamma range. So these are basically just big pulses and bursts of light energy across the entire spectrum of which the Schumann resonances are in. But the higher frequencies will attenuate out quickly because they get absorbed into the atmosphere or other materials, whereas the Schumann resonances, because they are the natural resonant energies of the Earth, they then get fed into the global Schumann resonances energetic layer, as you can see here. So again, this is our time axis there. We have 5 days here I collected from the 20th of May 2023 all the way to the 24th, and you can see here how this foundational mode just constantly exists. Whereas if we were to look at, let's say, 10 hertz, which is actually, it's a little surprising, it's showing up in this data here. Normally it doesn't show up at all. You can see it's intermittent. We have some 10 hertz activity, then there's none. Then there's a little bit, then there's none. Or why not 30 hertz? Where's 30 hertz? Well, 30 hertz is not a natural resonant energy for the Earth, so it exists. Yes, it does exist, but not at the levels like mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, mode 4. So these are elevated in power above background levels, and that is important because Schumann resonances interact with our biology. We almost certainly evolved in them. You can't say definitively unless you were to go back in time, like, 3 billion years and then 10 million years ago, all this stuff. But because they are created from thunderstorm activity and from various effects of the sun on the ionosphere and also from things like earthquakes, then it's almost certain that we evolved in these energy fields from the beginning. And since they are energy fields, and as a result have a high capacity for storing information, it makes sense evolutionarily for life to utilize these extremely low frequency energy fields. And the evidence suggests that they are foundational to our biologic operations through things like ion cyclotron resonance. The actual design of DNA makes it so it can connect to extremely low frequency fields like the Schumann resonances and much more. So let's get into that. We'll start with the most obvious connection. The one that a lot of people know about the Schumann resonances is that the Schumann resonances have the same magnetic field strength and frequency as human brainwave rhythms. Now, human brainwaves are a hallmark of consciousness. When human brainwaves go off, that's either a sign that you're unconscious, in a comatose state, or you're dead. So you can make someone go unconscious if you give them some sort of, there's certain like ion channel blockers that will stop delta rhythms in the brain, or you can actually run an electrical current through someone's brain that'll turn off delta rhythms. These are 0 to 4 hertz brainwaves. And when you do that, the person goes unconscious. So brainwaves and consciousness are intimately linked together, and different brainwave states, like if you have a lot of beta rhythms, that is different in terms of your conscious experience than if you have a lot of alpha rhythms. Beta rhythms are 12 to 30 hertz, and then alpha rhythms are 8 to 12 hertz. So these brain waves are indicative of where you are in terms of your conscious experience, and you can alter them through things like meditation. We'll go into that right here. We have clear evidence that master meditators, they can increase their power density of certain brainwave frequencies across the entire brain as compared to controls who don't have that meditation experience. So what we're looking at here is standard deviation of at least 1 greater than normal in the gamma band. So this is the very high frequency band for brain waves, and this is the percentage of subjects that were able to activate these standard deviations greater than 1. And so this is our master meditator group. Here are our controls. You can see our controls. Some of them are able to get a little bit of an increase in gamma brainwave activity for parts of the brain, but the master meditators were able to do it in these 4 distinct regions, and you can even see the band there, which indicates total brain synchronicity. So when you have the ability to influence your brainwave state, sometimes this happens through a variety of reasons. It can be just your circumstance. It can be because there are a lot of atmospheric energies at play, like space weather events or thunderstorms in your area. But when you're able to activate this total brainwave synchronicity, then this allows you to reach higher states of consciousness. And the Schumann resonances exist in that gamma band and can also help to cultivate that total brain synchronicity. So Schumann resonances and brainwaves are the same, both in strength and in frequency, and they can enter into phase with each other, which means that there can be resonant energy and information interactions between them. So there's a lot there. That's a clear sign that the Schumann resonances function beyond just our individual biology. Perhaps they are a subtle energy field that links all of life together and form a collective unconscious. So as Obi-Wan said, it's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. Now, the Schumann resonances also have interactions with the heart and in general with the nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is synchronized with time-varying magnetic fields such as sub-1 Hz geomagnetic resonances and 7 to 45 plus Hz Schumann resonances. So these are like very broad field line resonances, these sub-1 Hz ones. These are changes in these field lines, very low, long period wave fluctuations. But then also the autonomic nervous system, which is that part of the nervous system that you're, for the most part, not able to control, like your respiration, your heart rate, your arousal level, respiration, and very like your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. It's not, you can control it. You can learn to control and alter your autonomic nervous system, but it is a bit more of a background subconscious process that is linked to the Schumann resonances. So when you look at this, you can see heart rate variability, total power, and very low frequency power is correlated with Schumann resonance power variation. So here in the red, we have the Schumann resonance's power. When it goes up, you can see that the heart rate variability, total power, and very low power measures also go up. This is during a pre-storm period for about 2 weeks, measured across a bunch of volunteers who wore heart rate variability measuring devices, and then total power in the Schumann resonances was measured with magnetometers around the world, and then that data is aggregated together. Heart rate variability is the difference between heartbeats. So you have a heartbeat 1 second, and then 1.1 seconds later you have another, then 0.9 seconds you have another one, and it's an excellent indicator of your overall health and wellness and mortality and cardiovascular function and various things of this nature. So heart rate variability is a very powerful measure of your heart and autonomic nervous system health and function. As you can see here, there are strong correlations with this data set that was collected by the HeartMath Institute and other researchers. You can see very strong correlations there between Schumann resonance's power and the human bioelectric system. Because these Schumann resonances, while we do create them with our brain, and we also do create them with our heart, these are influenced by more than just the biosphere. These are also influenced by any electromagnetic phenomenon. So if you have solar flares, if you have a geomagnetic storm, if you have a thunderstorm, you can influence it artificially by generating them with a Schumann resonance generator, whether this is like in the home or on a military industrial scale. And the power grid influences things like the Schumann resonances. You see here, this data was collected in Russia, which runs a 50 hertz power system. And you can see the harmonics for that there. 10 hertz harmonics show up at 30. So that very faint line right there at 30 hertz. And then the reason the 20 hertz harmonic shows up better is because it's piggybacking on the energy of the mode 3 already, because mode 3 is centered at 20 hertz. So you get this line that shows up across mode 3, and that is a 10 hertz harmonic from the 50 hertz power grid that piggybacks on. You can also see another line there. So there are various harmonics that also show up in this ELF spectrum, but there are a lot of interactions with in the Schumann resonances beyond just our biology, just the biosphere. And this can then influence our biology in some very broad ways. So for example, our cells have cell membranes. These are electrically polarized, and they contain a lot of different ion channels. Some of them are voltage gated. There's a variety of ion channels. And ion channels are activated by electromagnetic fields through ion cyclotron resonance and the movement of internal charge carriers. So ion channels can have electrons within them, and then as electromagnetic fields sweep across, of course, every single part of space-time, if they have time-varying properties, then those electrons, which have such a small mass but a high charge, compared to something like a proton, it's an equivalent charge but negative, but the mass is 1,800 times less, then an electron can be stimulated to move even by an extremely weak energy field like the Schumann resonances. So extremely low frequency fields like the Schumann resonances influence ion channels, and this is important because ion channels are a major regulatory system in all living organisms. They play a critical role in DNA synthesis, gene expression, cell division, true regeneration, like heart contractions, and of course they're needed for neural spiking, and they are one of those things that help create those brain waves that we measure. Now, proteins, of which ion channels are, kind of aggregates of proteins or single proteins is larger. Proteins and enzymes contain these internal charge carriers, electrons, within them, and they can be stimulated to move via electromagnetic fields, which then would alter their intrinsic properties and overall function. So you can have enzymes that become activated because the electromagnetic fields change and make it in such a way that it becomes conducive to metabolize a reaction at a lower energy level because it's moving the location of these electrons within the enzyme. And then proteins can be activated or turned off or altered in their function by electromagnetic fields via mechanisms like these. Now, this is really shown very well with DNA. The interaction between Schumann resonances and DNA is really, really fascinating and where we have some of the best research. DNA exhibits a fractal antenna design. And this is because it's self-similar across all of its different scales. DNA has single strands, and then it gets wound up and curled and looped within itself until it becomes a chromosome, and then you have a whole bunch of different chromosomes. So if you look at a DNA molecule as a whole, it's quite similar in its design to just a single DNA strand, and that's self-similar design. So it has this fractal antenna design, which means that it can connect to a wide range of electromagnetic frequencies. On top of this, DNA is extremely conductive, and it contains free electrons within its base pairs. So it's conductive and contains the electrons needed to create electric current. Now, DNA also forms intricate loops. These are circuits, which is needed to establish an electric current. And even picotesla strength magnetic fields like the Schumann resonances are able to stimulate electron flux within DNA. And what this can do is it changes the genetic activation of DNA, so it can alter transcription, and just by moving electrons to different parts of the DNA structure, that informs the body which part of the DNA segment to transcribe. It also will change the shape and form of DNA, which also influences those factors. So electromagnetic fields can actually alter how your DNA activates. So people think DNA is the foundation of life. It's obviously incredibly important. It's like the blueprint, but electromagnetic fields would be the thing that drew the blueprint. So Schumann resonances are these very subtle electromagnetic energy fields that are able to interact with very important aspects of life like DNA. And the reason why these Schumann resonances are able to do that, whereas maybe an electric field would struggle, is because DNA is contained within cells, within the nucleus, and then also you have the cell membrane. These are electrically active, and so they, for the most part, block the electric fields from really being able to propagate through them. So if you do have an electric field, like a microvolt electric field in the body that interacts with the cell membrane, it might influence DNA through some secondary mechanism. Let's say it causes some voltage gated ion channel change of the cell membrane, which then has a secondary cascade which goes to the nucleus and influences DNA. But magnetic fields can pass directly through that cell membrane without any real attenuation, and therefore directly interact with DNA molecules. And these, again, are photons. So they can be absorbed into electrons. Very, very, very rarely they're absorbed into things like protons. But a DNA molecule is huge compared to a proton or a photon. So it's not like they're blocked out because DNA is small. These electromagnetic fields are one of the smallest things. They can have huge wavelengths. Their pulse rate can be fairly slow, and they travel at very high velocity depending on their medium. In a vacuum, it's like 300,000 kilometers per second. But just because DNA is tiny doesn't mean that they don't interact with them. So these are some of the things that we know Schumann resonances interact with. We have, of course, the brain, the heart, nervous system, cells, proteins, DNA. They also interact with water. Earth's direct current static magnetic field together with pulsed electromagnetic fields like the Schumann resonances can trigger ion cyclotron resonance. So we have the static magnetic field created by the electric dipole. Here are the core, both inner and outer. So this is our magnetic field that exists at 25,000 nanotesla to 45,000 nanotesla. When you combine that with a pulsed electromagnetic field, that can then cause ions. These are charged particles like calcium 2+, right? You have calcium here. It has 2 electrons in its outer orbital. And since it's so far out and it's not a complete orbital shell, they're easy to just get knocked out. And that forms Ca2+. That is one of the most common ions in the body. And together, these natural energy fields, the Earth's magnetic field, which is static and changing very slowly over time in terms of its intensity and the location of that, but changing much slower than the Schumann resonances, that is the pulse electromagnetic field. That triggers ion cyclotron resonance. And this is a new field that people are looking into in regards to biology. We've observed ion cyclotron resonance out here in the radiation belts. These are regions in near Earth orbit that contain highly charged ions, relativistic ions that travel near the speed of light. These can be electrons, like the outer electron belt here contains mostly those, and then the inner one contains a lot of protons, but they can also contain other ions like oxygen and so on. But ion cyclotron resonance also happens within the body, and that's actually one of the main ways that ion channels get activated is through ion cyclotron resonance. At least we've shown that you can activate ion channels by pulsing the ion cyclotron resonance needed for the specific field strength at play, that static magnetic field. So we have those frequencies. I calculated them out. I'm going to show that in the next slide. But before I go into that, this ion cyclotron resonance is dependent on static field strength, the pulse electromagnetic field frequency, vector direction for both fields, and ion mass and charge. So these Schumann resonances are able to interact with the Earth's magnetic field to influence things like our ion channels, and then that has a huge influence over, let's say, your nervous system and how your neurons react, because your neurons contain a bunch of ion channels. That's what helps them to have their neural spike, which is when they discharge. So if we go into this a little further, water makes up 50 to 60% of the human body. In women, it's 50% on average. In men, it's 60%. Collagen is the most abundant protein in the body, about 30% of total protein content. And then calcium is the most abundant mineral in the body, 1.6% by weight. So we have the water being the most abundant, collagen the most abundant protein, calcium the most abundant mineral. Here's where things get interesting. Water forms nanostructures called coherence domains, in which all molecules in the structure resonate together. Different frequency coherency domains nest together, forming supercoherency structures. So we have some coherency domains here going from small to large. These are visualized, but because of the fact that water can hydrogen bond, they can form these very large, intricate structures that then resonate together. So you have bulk water. You have just, in general, a whole bunch of water molecules. Due to quantum dynamics, a percentage of those will start to resonate together and self-organize. So they'll all begin to resonate as one. And when they do that, they now have the ability to hold on to energy and information in a collective way that they're not able to do when they have their own individual resonance patterns and they're just kind of pulsing at their own rate and there's no organized structure between them. So you can have very large coherency domains. These are nano. This is like 1 nanometer across right there. So these are nanostructures that water forms. And you can have coherency domains that resonate at one frequency, and then you have larger ones that resonate at a different frequency. And you can also form supercoherency domains where a whole bunch of individual coherency domains resonate together. And you can imagine how that gets nested throughout the body. Now, collagen is highly conductive as an N-type semiconductor, meaning it contains abundant free electrons, a necessary thing needed for an electric current, due to the presence of embedded ions like copper. And water plays a critical role in maintaining the shape and form of collagen molecules and determines their mechanical properties. Collagen is piezoelectric and it emits electric currents under mechanical stress. That's what piezoelectricity is that when you apply mechanical stress to a piezoelectric material, then it'll emit an electric current. And that's very commonly known with things like quartz. But what's less known is that collagen is a living crystalline structure that contains free electrons. It's superconductive. It has these semiconductor properties, and under mechanical stress, it can release electric current. So here we have collagen molecules. We can see the first one there is just the typical structure, the triple helix that makes up collagen. And then we can see the first layer of water that is added to it, and then the second and the third, and these are added via different bonds. But if you look at the final collagen molecule here, you can see how many water molecules are added to it. And these water molecules can form these coherency domains. So they have special resonant characteristics with electromagnetic energy, and these coherency domains can interact and do interact with Schumann resonances. So they can trap and capture Schumann resonances, electromagnetic energy, those photons, based on their special characteristics. And then that photonic information can be shared and distributed throughout the body to other coherency domains and beyond. So this is, if DNA is what makes proteins that our body uses, then it is really bioelectric energy, of which Schumann resonances are a very large part, that determine the overall information field of our body, our morphogenetic field. So that is collagen. And remember, collagen itself is highly conductive, piezoelectric, a semiconductor, and then next to it will form all these water coherency domains that also have unique electromagnetic properties. Now, calcium ions are the major regulatory ion in all living organisms. They play a critical role in DNA synthesis, gene expression, cell division, true regeneration, which means regeneration of the body and tissues from de-differentiated cells. You can think of these like stem cells. So this isn't just cells multiplying to fill an area. This is not scar tissue. This is literally recreating the body from scratch. And then calcium ions are also a very important part of heart contractions. They are the dominant ion found in the brain and the most used by neurons throughout the body. And calcium ions influence neurotransmitters and hormones. So if we are talking about the bioelectric properties of the body, you can see why calcium is so valuable, because again, it kicks out these two electrons very easily and forms this Ca2 plus ion. And because it is a bit of a larger element, it has a 2 plus charge and it's reactive, but it's not super strong in its reactive ability. So it can be used across a variety of things and purposes. I mean, calcium is an important component of bone, of which collagen is another very important component. But it can also then be used in ion channels and various tissues. So calcium has this like master role throughout the body because it can kind of do everything, and it donates its electrons out to the body, which free electrons are a very important component and necessary aspect of biology, because without free electrons, then anytime a free radical is developed, it'd be hard to neutralize it. So you can neutralize a free radical, which causes inflammation. Free radical is a molecule that's missing an electron or more. And you can neutralize it by using let's say, an antioxidant, which donates an electron to that free radical, or just through direct electron donation, because you might have free electrons stored within collagen fibers. And you can liberate some of those free electrons by applying that mechanical stress to them due to their piezoelectric nature. So if you were to, let's say you have some inflammation in your hamstring, if you were to stretch your hamstring, then that would liberate some free electrons from that fascial network and from all the connective tissues in that area, and that could help reduce that inflammation. And that could be even further compounded beneficially if you were to go outside and practice some earthing at the same time, so then your body is being replenished with free electrons as you're also emitting some of these free electrons piezoelectrically from your connective tissues. Now, there is there's more between Schumann resonances and the human body and bioelectricity and everything than just what I described so far. We have the strong resonance between geophysics and biophysics. These seem like disparate fields. I went to school for geology, got a Bachelor of Science in Geology, went to the workforce as a geophysicist, but I've always had this interest in biology. So it was a surprise to me when I learned about the Schumann resonances and saw how these things, which seem to be quite separate, are actually linked together at the foundation. So we already looked at the heart and Schumann resonances and how they form these rhythmic patterns of activity together, which can be thrown off during things like a geomagnetic storm, which can have biologic effects then that could, let's say, result in your heart rhythms being thrown off. If you have a heart problem, heart disease, that could be pretty serious. But then things kind of normalize back out afterwards. But so things like a geomagnetic storm, which alter the Schumann resonances, or artificial changes to Schumann resonances, can impact our biology just through things like heart rhythms. But they also interact with our brain. I talked about earlier how they're able to enter into coherence with our brain, and we have direct evidence of that. Some researchers took a EEG profile from a variety of volunteers. This is the from the brain, and then the electromagnetic background levels there. And what you can see here is all the times that coherence was established between the Schumann resonances, the background environmental electromagnetic fields, and the EEG of the volunteer. If we look at our frequency spectral plot there, we see 10 hertz, then we see 20 hertz, 30 hertz, 40 hertz. Well, here is that Schumann 7.8 hertz wave. So you can see that right there. And you can see another one right there. Of course, some other frequencies too, a little lower, but there's that Schumann. And then you have 14 hertz right here. So really obvious connections with the second mode of the Schumann resonances. And then really mode 3 is where things really shine at 20 hertz, which is one of our dominant brainwave rhythms during the day. That's our like a moderate beta rhythm. And we see that there's a very strong mode 3 resonance in the brain and coherent connection to the Schumann resonances there. So we can see that there, and then there, and there. And then even we see peaks here around 30, which is close to mode 5. And then here in the low 40s, which is close to the 45 hertz Schumann resonance mode. So you can, at times, coherency is established between the brain and Schumann resonances, and this is really influenced by your ability to alter this synchronicity, your phasing. The more you practice things like meditation, the easier it is to enter into brainwave synchronicity with environmental energy fields like the Schumann resonances, of which there's a lot of energy and information stored. So Carl Jung called this collective unconscious. This is known by some as like the holographic interference pattern. And there is a theory that the collective information of humanity is stored in the Schumann resonances, and this forms this global consciousness that, if you're able to enter into coherence from, can provide you with energy and information that you would have otherwise not had access to. So we also have different like biophysical, bioelectric rhythms in the body. These are a little bit more basic, not related to just the Schumann resonances, but I wanted to show these. This is the secretion of cortisol. So over 24 hours, what does that form? Forms the circadian rhythm, and that's of course connected to the rotation of the Earth in relation to the sun. So the sun rises and it sets, and we get this nice spike in cortisol every morning. Hopefully you do, because that's an important part of being healthy and feeling good and sleeping well and having good autonomic nervous system activity, is having healthy production of cortisol and not having too much, too little, and having the right timing of that. So we see that these geophysical rhythms, like the movement of the sun over the surface of the Earth, can influence our biology at a very basic level. We also see this with free testosterone. We have this free testosterone biocycle also for total testosterone and bioavailable testosterone, but free testosterone is the one I wanted to show. And you can see here that it rises in the morning too, right around about just like 8 a.m. or so. It reaches its high and then it dips down at night. So there are different biologic rhythms that are connected to our planet. You could think of it simply just like the solar rhythms, but then also these Schumann resonances have very, very powerful connections to our biology. And this is only what we know. We know they interact with DNA. They're able to change DNA transcription and activation, which of course is mind-blowing when you think about it. What you also want to consider is how do you activate and how can you use this information to further your health and wellness? Let's say you're an athlete, to perhaps improve your performance, to increase your cognitive abilities, to connect to the global consciousness, and that is something for you to ponder. Now, I did want to show too the ion cyclotron resonances for common electrolytes, because this influences your neural propagations and neural spiking and things of that nature, and just overall biology. Because again, that static field can be provided by Earth's magnetic field, and that has varying properties across the surface of the Earth, as you can see. So I calculated the ion cyclotron resonance for common electrolytes: calcium, sodium, potassium, magnesium, and chloride. If we look at our magnetic field here, this is the Earth's magnetic field total intensity for 2020, 2025. So this isn't going to be exactly perfect, but it's effectively all you need to know for this. And you can see here that if you live in this region right there of the United States, then you're exposed to a static magnetic field that is 50,000 nanotesla in strength, and that would be 0.5 Gauss. But if you're down here in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, in parts of South America, then it's only 25,000 nanotesla, or 0.25 Gauss. So depending on where you live influences the magnetic strength of the Earth's magnetic field, and that determines the specific ion cyclotron resonance. So for example, calcium has a ion cyclotron resonance at 25 hertz in a 35,000 nanotesla field. And 25 hertz, I highlighted that one because that is the fourth mode of the Schumann resonances. So if you were to have an increase in mode 4, then you can expect calcium ion cyclotron resonance to occur. What this means is that the ion now is resonating with this wave, and it increases in energy. And what can happen is that ion cyclotron resonance can actually push an ion out of a water coherency domain. So these coherency domains that water forms, these quantum dynamic states, can hold on to ions, and they can hold on to various compounds and molecules. And if the ion cyclotron resonance for that ion occurs, that can give enough energy to push it out, because you can imagine pendulum swinging or tuning forks. You hit one and the other vibrates. If it's the same frequency, energy is transferred into the system. So if the ion has a low energy state, it can be held in place by this coherency domain. But then if ion cyclotron resonance occurs, it can get kicked out, and that now changes the ionic concentration in the extracellular matrix and the cytoplasm, let's say, and different fluids, and that can influence your biology in pretty significant ways. That can change how calcium voltage gated channels interact with your neurons, and how they're propagating, changing neural spiking and your brainwave activity and your heart rhythms and various rhythms of the autonomic nervous system, etc. So that is calcium, which is the most common mineral found in the body. 1% of calcium is in the ionic phase. The other 99% is in bones and teeth. We see another ion cyclotron resonance for calcium at 0.45 Gauss, so 45,000 nanotesla at 32.3 frequency. I couldn't show all these, so I just calculated the 0.05 jumps. But in this zone here, again, right in this zone here or so, we have a ion cyclotron resonance for calcium at at around the 5th mode of Schumann resonances. So if you were to see an increase in mode 5, like what we see here, then that can change your calcium homeostasis and then influence your biology from the cellular all the way up to your conscious experience. That is at least the current theory. Now we also have sodium here, seeing ion cyclotron resonance at a Schumann resonance mode 3 at 0.3 Gauss, and then also for mode 5 at 0.5 Gauss. Of course, these other frequencies can also be activated depending on things like a thunderstorm, because it'll spike through the entire spectrum of light, but these are specifically at the Schumann resonances because those are those stable background energetic fields that are ever present. So potassium, another hugely important ion too, has cyclotron resonance at Schumann resonances for specific static magnetic field values for the Earth, which is what's important to consider because that's the one that's always on in the background. And then magnesium, which is a very important mineral, has cyclotron resonance at higher frequencies. So that's not going to be necessarily activated by the Schumann resonances unless, let's say, Earth's magnetic field was to decrease to very low value. But if you were to get a broad activation in the extremely low frequency part of the light spectrum, then you can see how magnesium ion cyclotron resonance could occur, and that would influence magnesium is used throughout your body, especially important in your brain, etc. So these are the Schumann resonances. This is the force as best we know here on Earth, and they interact with us and bind us together, and we evolved in these fields almost certainly. And so from the very beginning, from the first cells being formed to dividing and how they then split off into different lines, and then going there into the differentiation with fungi and plants and animals, and different differentiations between insects and mammals and reptiles, amphibians and fish, and all the different creatures interact together with Schumann resonances. And we have big, bright, healthy, beautiful brains as humans that are very powerful and very complex and developed, and they pulse at those Schumann resonance frequencies. But our heart also emits Schumann waves. If it's in coherence, those peaks stand out better than they would otherwise. And they're found throughout the Earth. They're found in the crust. They're found in the oceans, in the biosphere, the atmosphere, the ionosphere, out in space. We probably would measure them in the mantle and the core just because it's a frequency of light. These are just photons pulsing at a certain frequency. But the reason I can't say mantle or core yet is because we haven't put probes down there. That's just simply too difficult. All our measurements are indirect. We haven't put any probes directly into the mantle, like the deep mantle or the core yet. But these waves, again, this is more and more conductive as you go down. So these waves are propagating out, and they get trapped very nicely and stored and propagate very nicely in the upper layers of the crust, and then again in the biosphere, the atmosphere, and even in the ionosphere you can measure Schumann resonances. So they are one of these master geophysical signals that are associated with things as diverse as earthquakes and thunderstorms and solar flares and the Earth's temperature, but they're also connected to things like water and coherency domains and DNA, collagen, different ions and their cyclotron resonance, and cells and everything in between. So this is a topic that I wanted to educate further on. I made a bunch of videos on the Schumann resonances, but I wanted to kind of make a comprehensive zero to hero video for you all on this. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, click that like button, subscribe. I hope to see you around in future videos. And I suggest that you watch a couple playlists, one on earthing, which is one way to expose yourself to Schumann resonances and these free electrons. And then also a playlist here on electromagnetic fields and health. I'll see you all in the next video. Have a great day. Ciao.